Okay, well, welcome everybody. Welcome to our first ever intermission, after party, whatever you want to call it. We just thought we'd have a little fun and have people see each other. Now, of course, we'd love to have you all in Niles in Fremont, California right now, but some of you live a distance, so we thought it might be good for us to get to know each other. Now, I am looking on the gallery and I see only 5 people on it, so I'm guessing everybody else is too shy to show themselves. You are welcome to show yourself if you'd like. That was part of the reason for the sociability, because if you're on mute and we can't see you, then we don't know to say hi, other than we see your names. So I do know I see Sem from the Netherlands, and I see Dominic from, at least in name, from France. So where else is everybody from? If you want to chime in now, you can unmute yourself and tell us where you're from. Anyone?
I think people are still filtering in, Rena.
Still filtering in? Okay.
Yeah, it looks like Dominique is having audio issues, perhaps.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, I don't see him either. Yeah. All
Yeah,
right, well.
he's still connecting.
He's connecting.
We're all learning from this whole situation. Novato. Okay, well, you're just down the street from us. And Niles, that's just across the bay. Easy peasy. Anybody else want to put it in the chat where you're from if you're shy?
I'm from Rochester, New York area.
Rochester. Couldn't tell.
I have an aunt living there, or she used to live there. She died last year.
Oh,
Well, I guess she's not living.
Not living there anymore, but her kids are.
Do you go to the George Eastman house there?
yes.
Cool. All right. Tucson, Arizona. All righty. Anybody else? Let's see. So this is meant to be social, because all the other things we're doing, it's pretty limited in interaction. And we wanted to benefit from the fact that we are able to use Zoom and we are able to go around the world. It is early or late, depending on where you are. In France, it's midnight. So, but Dominique evidently seems to be a night owl, since he was in for our at 2:30 a.m. his time program yesterday with the Tilly Puncture Romance. Anyway, but my name is Rena Kiehn. I'm one of the board members here at the Niles S&A Silent Film Museum. And I'm constantly looking here to make sure that we have everybody in that's trying to check in.
I'll keep an eye on that for you, Rena.
Okay, thank you very much. So, who are you, Hooman? Why don't you tell them who you are?
I'm based in New York, and this is my 3rd Niles Festival. I don't know, if you want to read about me, go to the website for this weekend. It's a nice bio there.
Okay, how about you, Jason?
Well, I really like Hooman's decor there. And shirt. You got everything going on there.
Well, I'm in the Tomanian Palace, although I've heard there's a plot to bomb it, so I may not have to.
Oh, goodness.
Stay here long.
Oh.
Yeah,
So I've got my Niles Chaplin shirt here, and then you've got your Niles S&A Silent Film Museum shirt there.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'm tuning in from just north of Toronto, Canada, Ontario, Canada. And I'd love to be there in person. This is my 2nd time, of course, not being there, and that sucks. So.
Yeah, but hopefully next year.
Yeah.
And Miss Elizabeth, who are you?
I'm also hanging out in Fremont. I'm also a member of the board. We do fun things.
Yep, she's in charge of the money, so that's a very important thing. So let's see. Does anybody else want to say anything? If you like to, just type something in chat that you want to, and then you can unmute yourself. And because we don't want to make sure that this is a productive time. Dan Kamin hopefully will be joining us in just a few minutes. And Dan and Jason have a really neat project that they're working on that we can share. But we do want to have interaction, so we're not planning on doing all the entertainment, tap dancing for you.
Looks like Dominique finally connected, but he doesn't have video, only audio.
Oh, goodness.
Well, when Dan gets on, I have something to share with him. I couldn't share before because I was having Zoom trouble.
Okay, good. All right. Well, hello.
Oh, we've got Todd.
I'll just say hi. It's Todd Higginson from London, England.
All right.
I'm to do with the Kennington Bioscope, and we do silent shows online the last year and a half, and in person we hope soon again at the Cinema Museum in London. So I've really enjoyed all the past shows you guys have done. Adam Niles, I think I've caught them all. I've maybe not caught every part of all of them, but I've enjoyed the Zoom today and the Chaplin films today, and you guys are doing a fantastic job. So I'll probably mute myself again in a moment, but well done, and greetings from across the pond.
Oh, thank you. Chime in anytime, Todd.
Cheers.
Yeah, and thanks for staying up so late.
Yes, it is.
It's only 11 here in London.
It's 11, yeah, it's hard to keep track.
May I add something?
Different time.
Oh, Dominique.
So I did want to like.
It's even later for Dominique. He wanted to say something.
Just,
Oh, Glenn.
I
Okay,
totally
go ahead,
agree with.
Dominic.
Sorry, Rena. Sorry, I totally agree with Todd. It's wonderful being with you across the ocean at that time, even if it's midnight here in France. Thank you very much.
Well,
And
sure.
we have,
Oh,
and we have Glenn across the pond too, but he has his wife's name on the
Oh,
on the
Lynn.
screen. So
Okay,
I'm
you
going to
wanna-
I'm going to go
yourself.
ahead and rename you Glenn so that you can be properly
Glenn,
represented.
why don't you, Glenn, you're on mute. So go ahead, Glenn, unmute. Or should I say Linda?
I'm going to rename him.
Again.
Glenn is not a transgendered.
No,
Although-
no,
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but go ahead, Glenn.
no. It's just for tax reasons. I had myself put in my wife's name.
So why don't you tell us about yourself, Glenn?
Me? Oh, I just got here. Well, so in Chaplin circles, some people know me for my book, The Chaplin Encyclopedia. One of a few that I wrote about different comedians. No, freelance author, illustrator, former technician with the BFI long, long ago, and that's about it.
That's a lot.
that's it, eh? Wow.
Hey, Dan, you want to chime in, Dan?
Sorry, what?
Oh, I was saying for Dan Kamin to say hello.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
Hi,
Hello,
everybody.
Dan. Hi.
Dan?
Dan's coming to us from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Home of Mr. Rogers, if any of you know that. So
Oh, I remember Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, getting to a song lyric. I'm trying to remember which one it was.
It's something about a pawn shop.
I remember
Pawn shop on the border in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
That's right. That's it.
I remember pencils come from Pennsylvania and vests from West Virginia. That's from, I think that's from Little Old Rhode Island is famous for you.
oh my goodness.
English
Okay.
puns.
Well, I did want to put in a plug for the programs that we do have a whole year of virtual programming on our website. If you go and click on the Chaplin Days icon for this month, you can also see all of our past shows. So we've got programs about New York silent film studios and New Jersey silent film studios and Vitagraph and Biograph and other things about Chaplin. We had quite a few programs last year. We really put it all out there, laid it all out. It was a huge program, maybe 30 different things, because we thought surely we'll be all done with this pandemic thing by then. And so we have not as much on our schedule, our calendar this year, because real life started kicking back in. And yet we didn't have all the time in the world to put together a monstrous event, but it's still big enough and there's lots of fun things to see. But do take a look. We have gotten into some very, I guess they say, getting into the weeds. I mean, some of the things that we've talked about over the last year include who are the film companies that came to San Francisco after the earthquake and filmed there, things like that. So there's some very, what I would call esoteric subjects. But this weekend is all about Charlie. So I'll let everybody, I'll let the defer to the floor for you folks to talk. Karen had something she wanted to share with Dan, from my understanding.
Well, it's this afternoon you were asking about any new findings or new trivial things. So I was going to ask you if you've seen the Ed Sullivan Show YouTube channel where they have the appearance by Charlie Chaplin Jr. from 1960.
Oh, Dan, you're on mute.
He was making a mute point.
Excuse me for a moment. But, I had to say goodnight to my wife, the real one.
Okay, Dan.
I've never seen that, Karen. Have you ever seen it?
Well, the Ed Sullivan, whoever has rights to Ed Sullivan Show has started a YouTube channel, and they're not putting up whole shows, but they're putting different segments. They started with, of course, the famous stuff with Elvis and the Beatles and some of the other 60s rock people. But in the last few weeks was the 50th anniversary of the end of the show. So they've gone farther back into their archive, and they're putting up a lot of comedy segments, especially. So there's a segment with Charlie Chaplin Jr. as the Little Tramp. It's for May 1960.
Are you kidding? He's in a tramp costume and everything.
Well, not the whole costume.
Yeah. I'm going to put the link. I just seeing the link
Found
here. I'm going to put the link on our chat.
Okay.
You have
So
to
you
join.
can-
Wow.
Is it a pay thing where you have to join to see it?
No,
No,
it's
no.
YouTube.
Oh, good.
Wow.
Free.
Good. I look forward to it.
And there's two also, they recently also put up 2 segments with Harpo Marx
Yeah.
and with some of the stand-up comedians from the 50s and 60s era that were in a lot with Ed Sullivan. And they've even gotten to some of the plate spinners and those kind of people. So it's been interesting to see what they put up. But June 6th was the 50th anniversary of the end of the show. So I think whoever's running it's been commemorating that.
Yep. I just type into
Thanks
Google
for the tip.
Ed Sullivan Show, Charles Chaplin Jr., and it comes up.
And somebody on some other website has done like I don't know where they got all the information, but they have a breakdown of every Ed Sullivan episode. And like if it's a singer, what songs they sang or played.
Oh, that's great.
And if it's a comedian, what the routine was about. So the description for the show says Charlie Chaplin Jr. comes out and asks Ed for a job.
Wow.
They don't show that. They just start with him.
He asked
starting
him
to
for
do
a
the
what?
tramp routine. He's asking Ed Sullivan for a job.
Well, it's a very poignant autobiography that he writes, a biography of his dad.
That's the same year, the 1960s, when his book was published. So I'm wondering if he was promoting his book.
Well, probably, reluctantly, because he would say, one of the most poignant stories in the book is he would go in for an audition, and without looking up, it happened at least once to him, somebody said, "Are you as funny as him?" And he just turned and walked out. It's a very affectionate book. Those of you who haven't read it or haven't read it recently, it really holds up very, very well. A lovely portrait of his dad, a very lovely and affectionate portrait of a loving dad, and a sad, sad son.
You see this though? I'm just throwing.
Yeah.
So just showing to you. So that's part of that's a good tip. Thank you, Karen. All right, we'll go back to
Thanks.
stop share. Okay.
That was Charlie Jr.
Yeah.
Wow. Who is the opposite there? Who else was on the bench? The
Let's
Keystone
see.
guy.
Oh, I'm gonna guess they don't even have that.
I don't think he's in the IMDb or that database that has the breakdown of the show.
It looked like Dan Kamin from Attenborough's Chaplin.
I would have said if I didn't know it better that guy on the bench was a Jason Allin imitator.
Oh, brother.
Ah.
Laying it on thick, folks. Laying it on thick. All right.
So no, nothing I read about it told who the guy doing the Keystone Cap is.
Wow.
Thank you very much. That's great to know. That's great to see. I never knew anything like that existed.
And if you can stump Dan Kamin, that's good. I'm impressed.
Absolutely, and I think that book did really well because it's in every library in the country. So it was good that Charlie Jr. had a success with that book before his life was just so short and so sad. And I'm glad he at least had that.
Joe Addison says, on one of those Ed Sullivan Show appearances by Harpo Marx, Ed asks Harpo on camera, "What's next?" And Harpo says, "Harp" on national television, but it's inconspicuous. So he actually talked out loud. Wow. So does anybody have, if anybody has anything they want to share, this is your fellow nerds out here, people who appreciate Chaplin. So if you want to make sure that you're not jumping in, you can just make a note in chat saying, I've got something to share. Because I just want to make sure everybody gets, feels like they can have the floor for a moment. That's what this is about.
That would be great.
I was hoping somebody would share something with me.
Yes. Well, if we wait for everybody. All right. Well,
Glenn, I have something funny to share.
Sunny to share.
Oh, crumbs. Yeah, okay. Okay, I got you, babe.
Pop culture.
babe.
I'm sorry, Glenn. It's something out past 1924. It wouldn't be within your sphere of influence.
I have a narrow post-20s window that includes the 60s, so we're okay.
Wow.
Does it include the Rolling Stones lip syncing Sonny and Cher singing "I've Got You, Babe"?
Oh, that is fantastic.
Did they do that?
They did.
It's hilarious.
It was on Ready, Steady, Go, I think, a British pop show.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, that's really funny. Yeah.
I'll have to go look at that. That sounds pretty strange.
It's strange, but it's funny. And one of the best things I've seen the Stones do. I mean,
I've had some funny experiences with people insisting, several people telling me about how could I take them to go see the waterfront property that Charlie Chaplin owned in San Francisco. And then I said, I don't think there is any. And no, my uncle told me that there is one. And then there's other people in Niles who actually who insist that Charlie Chaplin stayed at their family's house, or they were in the movies, Yeah. And I just recently read somebody was talking about the fact that Mary Pickford evidently supposedly lived on I Street here, and they're related. She was good friends with Lillian Gish, and Lillian Gish evidently was here too. So because it was the original Hollywood. Yeah, isn't that amazing?
It's like the phenomenal number of beds that were slept in by Queen Elizabeth I. If they added them all up, there wouldn't have been that many nights in her lifetime. It couldn't be done.
Now,
same with George Washington here in the US.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, Mary Pickford actually could have technically come to visit Niles. It would have been after the studio was here, because she was in Pleasanton, which is only about a half-hour drive up the hill, as it were, to make Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm in 1917. And then her brother Jack came a couple of years later to do Tom Sawyer and such. So there was a lot of movies made in the Pleasanton area. So technically, she might have actually come and visited Niles. It could have happened. But I'm not sure about Ms. Gish. And people do want to say that Niles is the original Hollywood, when in fact, it was on par with what was going on in Hollywood. And I have many people who are upset when I tell them that if we really want to say the first movie making Mecca, and I point out New Jersey, nobody wants to have New Jersey be claimed. They want to be California, they want to be Niles. So it's rather amusing.
Yeah, nobody ever wrote a song called Hooray for Fort Lee, New Jersey. Sadly, there would be a hit with that title.
But I will give a shout out to Fort Lee, because they have now developed the Barrymore Center, and that is going to be an entertainment center. And Tom Myers did a great job over there. The Fort Lee Museum it looks like an old Army barracks or Fort Lee. It actually was a stonemasonry building built for a dentist in the 1920s, but it looks old school. It looks very much like a fort of some form. And he had an amazing display of all kinds of silent film memorabilia and pictures and posters and such. And that's all getting moved to the Barrymore Center. So if any of you get a chance to go to the East Coast in the next year, once all this hubbub is over, I think it'll be a great place to check out. And they should have quite a few nice things for silent films on display. So nothing Charlie related that I know of, but still.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter if it's not a fort, if there used to be a dentist, it could still be a drill hole. I'll leave now, shall I?
And I thought Americans were bad with puns. Okay,
Can I ask a question, please?
please do.
Yeah. Do we know why George Spore was in Chicago and Anderson preferred to be in Niles, and why Niles instead of Los Angeles area? Why the San Francisco Bay?
I
And-
can actually, yes, I can answer that for you.
Yeah.
So what happened is actually Gilbert M. Anderson, who started out life as Max Aronson out of, believe it or not, Arkansas. He was in New York, working there, and he got enamored with being in theater, and they told him to go pose in pictures, which was kind of an insult, like go jump in a lake. And I guess being in the movies was actually thought of as a lower rung than the legitimate stage, because why would you call it the legitimate stage, except that there was the stage, I guess, was movies. So he appears in several movies, including The Great Trip in 1903. 4 years later, he has made his way to Chicago. He partners with George Spore. George Spore is a rental exchange guy. He, kind of think of Netflix before there was Netflix. Remember when Netflix was sending the DVDs in the mail? Well, George Spore figured there was more money to be made if you rented out the films. So they develop a partnership. By now he's being called Gilbert M. Anderson. He develops a character named Bronco Billy. They're making movies in Chicago. Anderson wants to make Westerns. It's hard to make Westerns in the snowdrifts of Chicago in the middle of winter. It was industrialized even 100 years ago with the stockyards and such. And so he decides to go out west. He goes to Colorado. He makes movies in Colorado, Texas, Mexico, Southern California, and people tell him about Niles. Now, he actually had gone to Northern California, gone to Niles, and he got rained out for multiple weeks on end. So that kind of soured him on the experience. That was 1908 or 1910. Anyway, he ends up coming back to Niles in 1912, sees the picturesque canyon, sees the town that still looks like the Old West, and decides this is a good place to be. Now, my understanding is what happened, he was like P.T. Barnum. He would go to the newspaper office and say, hey, we're here making movies, you should write about us. And he did that in every town. And that's why there was actually good accounts of movies being made throughout the whole West Coast. And that's why my husband, David Kiehn, who's a historian for our place, he wrote a book called Bronco Billy and the S&A Film Company. And he was able to gather a lot of information because of the newspaper accounts, or even diary entries home, or photographs that were taken. But there was more information about this traveling band of people than the home base of Chicago. He's now working on the home base of Chicago book, but having to do it a different way than the traveling story. Anyway, so he comes to Niles. Anderson comes to Niles with 52 players, 52 cast and crew, April 1st, 1912. He goes to the newspaper office, tells people about that they're going to be making movies here, and walks from one end to the other end of this 4-block long, now a whopping 5-block long business district. By the time he gets to the end, he has $100 of money from the different store owners who have given him pledges supporting his cause. And as we know, a lot of times actors and people involved with any form of theater they were going to boarding houses, and there were signs that would say no dogs or actors allowed. I mean, they were not well thought of. So to get that much support, literal financial support and good wishes from the store owners in Niles, which, by the way, there were more bars than churches in the area. He felt really good about that. So he committed to setting up the company there. He ended up renting a barn, set up a stage, an open air stage behind it. He had props and costumes inside the barn, and they built a studio. That studio was $52,000 at the time, which was quite a hunk of money. It looks like, if you see photographs of it, it looks like it's a brick building, but it really was actually just pressed steel. So think of a big drafty garage. And then the back part of it, they ended up putting in a glass and steel structure that allowed them to shoot films, multiple films next to each other, that allowed for the wind. The wind factor was not an issue as it was with the open air stage. So that is how he came to Niles. Spohr stayed in Chicago. He was the money man. He signed the checks. So he was not a happy camper when this person he hadn't really heard of, Charlie Chaplin, gets signed by Bronco Billy Anderson. Because the rumor had gone out that for a $10,000 signing bonus, he'd sign on with another company after making the whopping $150 a week salary that he was getting over at Keystone. And Jess Robbins, who was Bronco Billy's right-hand man, and that's Gilbert Anderson, became Bronco Billy in over 100 movies. So we call him, we go to Gilbert, GM, Bronco Billy, all the same guy. So Jess Robbins said, you really need to sign this guy on. And that's what he did. And gave him $10,000 and $1,250 a month, or excuse me, a week, $1,250 a week. Now, when he left within a year, because Spohr didn't want to keep him going on, he got $100,000 signing bonus, and what was it, $10,000 a week, something along those lines. So it's yes.
Too. I think I'm interrupting Glenn in an ancillary question. Am I interrupting you, Glenn?
No, I'm just listening.
Well, don't listen so loudly, please. I wonder, I like to think that anybody who could ride a horse got a job with Billy in the films. Did he hire a lot of locals, or was it pretty much patronizing their restaurants, etc.? Did he get locals into the films at all?
He definitely did. In fact, one of the movies that we showed last Bronco Billy's Silent Film Festival that's online, there's a film called The Movies Go West, and Hal Angus, who was in the films, this was 40 years later, 50 years later, whatever it was. It was 60 years, that's right, it was 60 years later. He goes, this is how it happened 60 years ago. And now we could watch that movie from 1974. This was 100 years ago. Pretty amazing. But anyway, he told stories. He ended up marrying Josephine Rector, who was the head script writer, scenario writer. And she had a couple men working for her. She was a single mom, and she ended up marrying one of the cowboys, Hal Angus. Also, a tidbit for those of you that are silent film fans, from my understanding, Diana Sarah Carey, otherwise known as Baby Peggy, so Peggy Jean Montgomery, her father was evidently one of those cowboys that traveled, and because as farms were not needing as many drovers and cowboys when the trains came around, various reasons for that, they ended up going to Hollywood and got jobs actually riding horses or training people to ride and such. And my understanding is Jack Montgomery came through and was in Niles for a time, and then before he moved on to Hollywood. And so that's part of her, when she had a connection with us, it was more than just because she liked us and we liked her. It was also because of her father coming through town in Niles. So
were there ranches here that there were actual cowboys?
For sure. Oh yeah, this was a very rural community at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and orchards and oh sure, yeah, the East Bay was very, very.
Was like Roy Rogers a baby here in arms when they moved in, and eventually they introduced him to Trigger?
Are you being facetious now?
No, I want to know. I've always wanted to know how Trigger came to be. It's been. I wondered if it was a happy trail here at that time.
I think that's another webinar or another program. I don't know.
Somebody needs to research that.
Okay.
And Roy Rogers was from Ohio.
What's that?
I think Roy Rogers was from Ohio.
Okay, party pooper.
Well, actually, there are some people who insist that Tom Mix made movies here and other people made movies here because I have a feeling there was a conversation at one point where they said something like, Bronco Billy, like Tom Mix made movies here. And then boom, now Tom Mix is making movies here. So
was he the one that came up with the expression, we'll fix it in the mix? Maybe not. Maybe I've been misinformed.
Does anybody else have anything they'd like to say?
Of more positive, constructive nature.
You want someone to change the subject? How about this one? We know that Sid did Charlie's deals for him. He negotiated with Mutual, negotiated with First National. Is it well known that, according to the G.M. Anderson interview with the Turning Point, the Arthur B. Freeman interview, the S&A deal was done through Sid, according to Anderson? He approached Sid and not Charlie. Do you give credence to that?
Is that part of David's book? I'm not
No.
recalling. I know that Sid was brought in. Sid's in Charlie's last Keystone film.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I'm bringing in a ringer. We're bringing in. Come here, David. You have to answer this.
I think I would doubt that. I think Anderson is probably confusing the renegotiation at the end of the
Right.
year.
Right.
Sid would have just been getting started with Senate and was probably too busy.
Well, yeah, I just got the
June of
impression that he pounced upon Sid as soon as he got to Keystone. But, no, you're probably right.
what does David have to say about it?
Okay, hold on. David needs to talk loud. He's a quiet guy, so talk a little louder, hon.
The first negotiation in November of 1914 was with Jess Robbins, who had set up his own Robbins Photoplay Company in Los Angeles after leaving S&A, making short films at his own company, not doing very well. And he got the idea that Chaplin would be good at S&A. And he was the guy that thought of the $10,000 signing bonus. And after he got a preliminary talk with Chaplin, then he brought in G.M. Anderson, and Anderson agreed, thinking that Charlie was wasted at Keystone and that Anderson could give him a free hand and do what Charlie needed to do at S&A.
David, do you know whether, because Senate was negotiating with Chaplin and he wanted very much to keep him, and I understood that they were trying to keep the competing potential offers away. Was that, did Jess Robbins, are you aware of whether he had to go through some kind of hoops to get in touch with Chaplin? Or was he so much into the industry that he just went over to wherever he was living at that time?
I don't know the details. Robbins was only interviewed once by Jordan Young towards the end of his life in 1973. And Jordan was interested in the Laurel and Hardy connection and didn't go into detail about his career, unfortunately.
In the Red Letter Days articles that came out in 1916 and 17, Fred Goodwin's one of Chaplin's actors at S&A and then at Mutual, and also his PR man at the time, who was writing all kinds of articles, had a lot of his own candid photographs. And there's one good photograph of, I think, Charlie returning, he and Jess Robbins returning on a train from somewhere. I don't remember where it was from. It seems to me it was actually possibly coming up from LA at the beginning of the deal, although that doesn't sound right. But we weren't able to reproduce that photo in the book because although it's way out of copyright, the library wanted to charge a royalty fee for reproducing the photographs. But I use it in my live presentation on Red Letter Days, that period of Chaplin's life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not much of a clue, but he's mentioned several times in Fred's articles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, Jess, because of his first negotiation with Chaplin, he was able to negotiate with Anderson to be the producer of Chaplin's S&A films right from the start. And
Yeah.
he went to Chicago with Anderson and Chaplin, and he's there actually on screen as the cameraman on the set that you see in the film.
Is that so?
That's him as the cameraman behind the Bill & Hal camera.
What a nice thing to know. I didn't realize that.
His new job.
his new job, and Jess was with him all through the SNA time period. So
So they were just good friends.
they were, yes.
And so no involvement of Sid Chaplin in those 1914 negotiations, as far as you
No,
know,
I'm
David.
pretty sure he was not. It wasn't until June of 1915. And in fact, Anderson's lawyer, who was based in San Francisco, at first didn't want to write the contract because he thought it was so out of bounds in terms of money. He was there also in the June 1915 renegotiations, and his grandson sent me a photograph of Sid, Charlie, Anderson, and his grandfather lawyer, Herbert Kowinski, standing outside in Los Angeles next to an automobile talking.
David, is this the renegotiation in which Chaplin agreed to make 10 more films for them or something?
He was going to get a bonus for every film that he completed. So
I know that happened, but he didn't fulfill the contract for 10, and nobody seems to have to know definitely. And I'll bring it up in our very sophisticated company here, because they were able to answer an amazing number of things I've wondered about for years, specifically Glenn and Dominique, when I did the session this afternoon. Nobody seems to have ever found the answer to how Chaplin settled with George Spoor, because Spoor sued him over Chaplin's failure to make 6 films, and he sued him for 150, I don't know how much the original, $500,000. He was asking for $100,000 per film. And Chaplin evidently settled with him on the way to New York to edit The Kid. And we suspect, but if you ever come across any information about the specific, it doesn't seem to be in the archives available, of what the nature of that settlement was, how much Chaplin paid him off. It seems like a $500,000 would have been a lot of money in 1921, but I'd be curious about that. So Dominique and Glenn, you have your work cut out for you.
Thank you.
And actually, I mean, but that's actually years after the SNA company closed down. So,
But
gee
Spoor was
whiz.
continuing the lawsuit. He was pursuing the lawsuit.
Yeah.
We know that much, and I gathered it was because of the great. Do you think, David, that there was any that Spoor, that one of Anderson's incentives for going out west is that he had already gotten fed up with Spoor and he just wanted no part of him, because they seem to have so much acrimony, at the end of the SNA period, too. Do you know whether it originated earlier?
There's no solid evidence about that. There was some talk when most of the personnel left for the American Film Company in September of 1910, that there was some problem between Spoor and Anderson, but that's just rumor. The interesting thing for me is that none of Anderson's crew that he'd traveled around with left for American. They were all based at the Chicago studio who left. And I think that Anderson's first trip west in December of 1908 was simply based upon Chicago winters, and that
Not getting away from Spoor.
I don't think so. Not in December of 1908. Anderson just saw California as and that's where it went first, San Francisco, California, in December of 1908, thinking that sunny California was a good place to shoot outdoors. And
How many
he
weeks
was
did-
there for 2 months in California.
Got rained out the whole time.
No, he was in San Francisco for about 3 weeks, and then they told him Southern California was the place to go. And then he was in Los Angeles, Pasadena, Santa Monica, and he actually shot his first real Western in Yuma, Arizona, on the way out towards Chicago.
Did you say Huma, Y-U-M-A?
YUMA, Arizona, in January of 1909.
Wow. Well, you know, in your book, you document what a great corporate citizen he was with all the kinds of events like baseball games with the townsfolk. And it was really, your book is an amazing picture because it's so full of names and facts, and yet it reads like a great short story, right, or a great novel, because we get to know everybody. Everybody has their moment. And one of the things I really appreciated about reading it was the evidence you present that he was pretty much of a beloved citizen here and did a lot of things right, which is a good example for corporations used to, till fairly recently, take that as a kind of a model, not Billy, but, you know, take the notion of being good corporate citizens. Then when everything got diversified and a different strategy took hold, you know, we seldom see that anymore. So it's nice to read that about Billy's stewardship of the company here. I mean, there in Niles.
I will say one thing, through all my research over 20 years now, I have never seen a photograph of Anderson and Spohr together in a photograph.
You know, another interesting little tidbit about that is Chaplin in his autobiography, it seems like he's talking about a period much later, says that Spohr told him about, as I'm recollecting, that the reason that his mind changed about coming and showing his face and after he had refused to pay the salary check and bonus was because of the thing of paging Chaplin in his hotel. Wherever was that hotel in Chicago somewhere, or was it New York? Had he fled to New York?
Supposedly, Spohr was good at telling stories, just like a lot of other people in the film.
So it may not have been true, but the interesting thing to me about the story is that Chaplin seems to be, he says he told him years later, he seems to be talking after the SNA time and also after the settlement of the contract, presumably in 1921 or so. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing to me about that is that he was still on speaking terms at all with Spohr, that he wouldn't just turn and walk around or, you know, walk out the other way, because he had good reason, and he makes it very clear in his book, you know, to really detest Spohr, who put him in a completely awkward position by not being there to sign the check as promised. And when Charlie was making his new job, he was doing it with no salary and no bonus and nothing, and thinking maybe he's being exploited and the people will go bankrupt and avoid paying him and try to sell his film. And you know, that was the first of many insults to come from SNA. So I just thought it was a great example of Chaplin's equanimity, if it's true, if the story is true from Spohr, if the story is true from Chaplin, which is two big ifs.
Well, you know, you wouldn't really consider George Spohr a bad guy in any particular sense. There were a lot of employees who worked for him who were really complimentary about him. And for instance, whenever Gloria Swanson came through town, she visited him, and so there were.
Say that again about Gloria.
He had a good side.
David, I just lost you on my audio. Could you say the thing about Gloria Swanson again?
Whenever
I wanted to hear it.
Whenever Gloria Swanson came through town in Chicago, she would visit George Spohr.
Huh.
So to my knowledge, there is no existing image of Chaplin with Spohr. Many images with Anderson, and the much publicized one was with Francis X. Bushman with Anderson and Chaplin in the center. But there is no, to my knowledge, existing image of Chaplin with Spohr. Am I wrong?
I haven't seen one either. I've seen Spohr with Max Linder. I've seen Wallace Beery with Chaplin in Chicago, but no Spohr and Chaplin, no Spohr and Anderson either.
The way I figure it is, it's easy enough to say Spohr was a businessman. He did things the way that he wanted to because he thought that was the right thing for business. And that, you know, if you think about it that way, it's, you kind of, well, okay, he was trying to make money. He was trying to make things, he didn't necessarily have to be all Mr. Heartwarming personality. It sounds like Anderson really was very personable, as you mentioned, the ball games, the parties, the hanging out with people, the going into the, you know, being available to be interviewed, all those things. I mean, he was a regular P.T. Barnum. People went into his circle. So just to, I'm going to share screen here for a second, and just so you can see if anybody's looking here.
Anderson was an actor.
He was an actor, yeah, but he also, you know, but he also was a director. Anyway, here's a picture of David's book, just in case anybody's interested. And that's all I wanted to do, just show you that. And
David, I have another question for you while you're here. Thanks for stopping in with us. I know you're in the midst of, you get your hands up to the elbows in joint compound in the building construction sense. When Charlie and Anderson went to a theater in San Francisco, was that on Charlie's way out of Niles to open up his studio in L.A., or was that after, on the way? What period was that? Because there were pictures of that in Fred's articles.
That was in April of 1915 when Charlie was on his way to Los Angeles.
On behalf of SNA, still working for
Yeah,
SNA.
still working for SNA, yes.
so why don't you tell them the story about what happened there, because it's pretty neat. Was that the theater, Gaiety? He's got a lot of information. He's trying to sort it out, figure out what would you want to hear.
Accessing.
Exactly.
What happened in the theater that night?
Well, it's just, I think it was, if I recall correctly, I think it was at Sid Grauman's theater in San Francisco. And it wasn't just Chaplin and Anderson, it was also Roscoe Arbuckle who was there.
Yes.
Same time, and the three of them were spotted in the audience and went on stage and spent a considerable amount of time performing in some fashion for the audience.
Sounds like a
We
pretty
don't have a
special
single
show.
clue what they did, do we?
No, I haven't come across any detailed account other than that they were there and they spent something like a half an hour on the stage.
Although you do recount the great story of Charlie and Billy going to Chicago at the beginning, and they did some PR. SNA's masterful publicity department set up a bunch of photo ops, and one of them was that they appeared at the charity ball, and they both were in character costume, Billy as Bronco and Charlie as the Tramp, and they danced the tango together. And somebody you quoted, I think, and I found more of that mention, it was in Motion Picture News or something, that they did one of the weirdest and funniest stunts on or off the stage, dancing the tango. And they were dancing to the promotional piece that sheet music that was probably given out in movie theaters, Bronco Billy, beautiful sheet music cover, and it is listed as a tango on the inside. It's a tango with no words. So wouldn't we have liked to be a fly on the wall that night too, as Bronco and Charlie did their tango together?
It sounds like they really got along well. And from our understanding is Charlie did spend at least a little bit of time in Niles, in Bronco Billy's house. And one of the stories we like to tell, because it actually made it to his autobiography in a very small way, because he doesn't talk much about the SNA period, understandably. It wasn't necessarily the warm spot, but I think he really liked Anderson. But from our understanding, he thought he was going to be going into this California millionaire's mansion. And then he finds out it's a tract home that was built, that Anderson had built a bunch of homes for his cast and crew to rent back. So he goes into this house that is just trashed. It's a single light bulb dangling and overflowing ashtray full of cigarette butts and fruit crate furniture. And my room was even worse. It was horrible. My room was even worse. It didn't even have the fruit crates. And David was able to uncover the reason why. So do you want to tell them that?
So when Anderson first came to town, he bought a house at the corner of F and 2nd Street that had been built in 1910 and rented out the other 10 houses that he built for cast and crew for, it was $25 a week, I think it was. And some of the cowboys were living in the first bungalow next to the alleyway that was built. And they moved out and towards the end of 1914, and Anderson, for whatever reason, moved into that house that had been trashed by 3 cowboys that had been living there. And Anderson really didn't care about it. You know, his time in Niles was spent making movies, and he would make them as quickly as he could and then spend the rest of the month in San Francisco having fun. He had a suite at the St. Francis Hotel.
There we go. Jason's showing you a picture of some of the bungalows.
So that house that's still there next to the alleyway, right next to the studio, was simply a place for Anderson to sleep between movies.
But Chaplin didn't know this, so he walks into this trashed house and is thinking, this is really how the millionaires live in California? What's going on with this? And I've been in the other house, the original house that Anderson had, and there was a whole bullet hole in the ceiling. And I kept picturing like some New Year's Eve party where cowboys got a little too crazy or something. So it is fun for us to go walk around town and be able to point things out. If you didn't know some of the things that happened, you couldn't know. But I will put in a plug for John Bengston's programs that he's done that we have available. We have the one from last year, which is where he talks about all the Niles connections. And then he has a new one for this year that talks about the kid and some other Chaplin films. And they're just pretty amazing because it allows you to go to some places that are still there. David's actually found some of the locations and shared them with John. And then between the two of them, I mean, it's quite the collaboration of them comparing notes of information. One of those was from the movie A Night Out, where there's exteriors. And the fact that some of those exteriors were in Oakland and some of those exteriors, one of the exteriors was in San Jose. And it was one of those things where David had his thoughts and then John has thoughts, and all of a sudden between the two of them figured out the locations, and it's pretty amazing. If you go to San Jose now, you can actually still see the building that he walks out of that used to be a saloon, not surprisingly, in 1915. But there's more information. Either watch John's video thing or go to his blog about silent locations. It's a WordPress blog. So what else? Who else has something to say here?
What about the Indoor Yacht Club in San Francisco? Do you know anything about this?
Yacht Club? No.
Because in some papers of the time, Motion Picture Magazine, the Indoor Yacht Club in San Francisco granted Chaplin with a ring, with a bag for, I don't know which event it was. It is dated.
Did you say that again?
It is dated October 1915 in Motion Picture Magazine. The Indoor Yacht Club on San Francisco granting Chaplin with a diamond ring.
So the yacht club gave him a diamond ring.
Yeah.
Okay.
According to the press of the time.
I haven't heard anything about that, but just because I haven't heard doesn't mean anything. David, have you heard anything? But that may be along the same lines as, I mean, it may very well have happened. I mean, it sounds like it's within the realm of possibility, but maybe that's the same line of thought about the, owning waterfront property or something. Don't know. Anybody else? what else we have here? Because Jason and Dan do have a program. They can show you a project that they're working on. It's a really neat video about what they're doing, and they can answer questions about that. But I just want to make sure everybody's had a chance to say hi. It looks like a lot of people want to, they're flies on the wall, they're listening or watching, and that's perfectly fine. But if anybody has anything they want to say, now's the time.
Should point out that that video is the same project they discussed last year, but it has been updated. When it first starts, you'll think it's the same thing, but don't switch it off.
Oh, no,
there's new material.
It's really special. It's really special. I hope you folks all continue. So, okay, let me see. So Karen did mention here about Adam Seltzer of Mysterious Chicago is repeating his virtual tour of Chicago silent movie history, which includes SNA, tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So she's posted the Facebook link on the chat. So if you have that opportunity, take a look at that. That's really neat. And then we also have some other programs tomorrow as well. We'll be having our whiz bang talent show, trivia quiz, and good time hour, because a lookalike contest, because I don't know how to make a name for it. But we're going to have our lookalikes from around the world. We have people from Argentina, from Brazil, from Australia, and Sem over here from the Netherlands. I see his name listed here. So, and also, who knew, Los Angeles, California. So they're all going to be part of our show. I'm really looking forward to it. Everybody got really inventive this year. Joanna Ramos actually put together a program that involved everything from a lemonade stand to dinosaurs, and it worked with Charlie in the middle. And so she did a 6-minute film, and we shrunk it down, or she gave us a 2-minute bite of it, and then we're going to have the 6-minute version posted. You want to see the whole thing because it's very inventive. Let's just put it that way. So, anybody else? Any other questions? Anything they want to share?
I have a quick one. When they were at the theater, Arbuckle and Bronco Billy and Charlie, do we think Mabel Normand might have been there? Because that sounds like when they were filming some of the stuff around the PPIE.
Pan Pacific International Exposition, otherwise known as the World's Fair of 1915.
She isn't listed in the articles that I've seen.
But do we think that Roscoe came another time, though?
It might have been. Yes.
I mean, Charlie only was here for 3 months, so, but that doesn't mean that Roscoe might not have come up twice during that time.
Arbuckle was here at least twice during the time that Chaplin was in Niles.
Okay, so, how do you know that?
Because he was here in April, and he was here in, I think the Champion was being filmed in February, so or early March, I forget which.
And that actually is important to point out. The reason why we actually have a photograph of a large man looking at Charlie filming, and there's Mabel Normand as well. So there's Roscoe Arbuckle and Mabel Normand are watching Charlie filming the Champion. They're a little fuzzy, but you know who they are.
Yeah, Michael points it out in his introduction this year to the film.
So that was in February. And so then you're saying a couple months later, Roscoe would have come back, and that's when they went to the theater. Okay, well, there's definitely proof that Roscoe was here twice then in a couple of months. But that's just a train ride up from Los Angeles, right?
People from Los Angeles came to San Francisco all the time.
Well, yeah. Okay, well, actually tell them the story, please, about Wallace Beery and Gloria Swanson and his Roadster. That's a really good one. It has nothing to do with Charlie, but it's a good tidbit.
Gloria Swanson left SNA to go to Los Angeles and got a job at the Keystone Film Company. Wallace Beery left the Chicago SNA and came to Niles in around September of 1915 to just direct films in Niles. And he would take his Mercer runabout from Niles, drive down to Los Angeles for the weekends to visit her. And he was a real speed demon with his automobile, and would often be caught by the motorcycle cops who were in some instances waiting for him on Mission Road while he was coming back into Niles. He was caught at least one time by a motorcycle cop named Leon Solon, who was eventually a Niles resident, and his house is still here in Niles. And there's actually the surviving guest registry for the Belvoir Hotel here in Niles. And Leon Solon and Wallace Berry's names are together in that registry from when they were battling on the road.
So what was your conjecture that why are the names next to each other in the registry?
I assumed that they had luncheon at the Belvoir, which is what you could do in those days.
So they came in, they signed, it didn't mean they were, getting a room or something. It meant they were signing in. So just because they probably said, we want your autograph, probably. But the fact that the cop and Wallace Berry signed on the same registry to probably have lunch together, I just think that sounds like really funny. And they called themselves.
In later years, Leon would say he was in cussing terms with Wallace.
Cussing terms with Wallace. Yeah. Sorry. I figured that was a good story to end on. It didn't have anything to Charlie, but we're all friends here. So with how about Jason and Dan? Why don't you share your project? And otherwise, please all stay with us because I think you're gonna really enjoy this program. So
yeah, okay. Well, Dan and I have been working for it feels like 20 years now because of COVID, but it's we've been working 3 years on this, and the project we're working on is I came to Dan one day at Niles, Charlie Chaplin's day. What year? 2017 was that?
I think it was 1917.
1917. I approached Dan. He had just filmed that bit with Charlie Chaplin Jr. on the Ed Sullivan Show, and So we're interested in seeing something on the streaming platforms, a modern television series of Charlie Chaplin, and I had a concept that I approached Dan with, based off of some inspiration out of his Red Letter Days book with Fred Goodwin's letters. And I kind of expanded the thought from there, thinking, well, this could really work into a television show, a serial of some sort, season by season, on Netflix, let's say. And of course, Dan told me about an unpublished book that he's written, a juvenile novel about Charlie Chaplin that has a lot of fiction built into it, as well as fact that we could work on. And that doubled the inspiration for me. And we got together on over the phone and online and discussed it. And eventually it formed into a 3-season, 30-episode television series. And we put a title to it. We're now learning the process of how to pitch to somebody, to Netflix preferably at this point, but a producer or anybody who'd listen. Any amount of fish in any barrel anywhere would be nice. But we had to figure out how to pitch this and how to put it together. So we've created a video somewhat outlining the concept. Well, it doesn't give you any real idea of what it would look like. It should give you a little bit of feeling to it, what kind of product we'd see on any streaming platform. But we do have the little outline of each and every episode. Every episode, as a matter of fact, Dan has really refined the arc of the entire series. And we presented this last year, a really brief video that I put together, but this is probably the 6th or 7th version of it since then. And Dan hasn't even seen this one. I just finished a little bit of it today, in the middle of it. And I wanted to present it. It's an 8-minute video, And Dan, do you have any more to say about what we're trying to pitch and to whom and whatever?
Yeah, if you're not a big time producer, could you please turn off your television sets now? And don't. No, actually, to see this properly, first of all, we have to apologize because Zoom doesn't play well with video in many cases, as you probably have seen. And so to maximize what you're seeing, make sure you're looking at speaker view. Rena, please spotlight Jason so that everybody's seeing his image where he'll share this. And
you can't spotlight on a regular meeting, Dan. I think.
Yes, you can.
Oh, you can? Okay.
Yeah. But you have to be the host. Are you the host too, or is Rena?
Hooman's co-host, and I'd like him to do it.
Well, I can't. I don't see a spotlight function, so I don't think it.
Yeah, I think if everybody does spotlight, if they go up to the corner
view
and do the view and do it as the speaker view, that would do what we're looking to do. So please make it so Jason's in the main part.
Okay. All right.
Rather than gallery.
The other thing you can do is put your cursor over Jason and hit where it says pin video.
Pin.
Because that'll make it large. Yep.
I think it automatically goes large, even if you're in the gallery view, but if he's presenting, but we'll see.
No, it won't. I
think the pin is the great option. So hit pin, go to his picture, hit pin, and now he's the first and foremost thing we're seeing. Good.
Okay. All right. Well, did you want to say any more about what they're about to see here, or should I just jump in? It's about an 8-minute concept video, and I see I've been spotlighted there now. So
hit it.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, I figured it out.
Hi, this is Dan Kamin. While we're getting the projector set up, I'd like to introduce you to my friend and co-conspirator, Jason Allin. Jason's a talented actor whose portrayal of Charlie Chaplin has taken him around the world.
And Dan does comedy in theaters and with symphony orchestras worldwide. He doesn't play Chaplin in his shows, but he trained Robert Downey Jr. to play him for his Oscar-nominated performance. I think he knows more about Chaplin than anyone in the world.
Thank you, Jason. So before telling you about our Chaplin project, let's introduce the man himself.
Funnyman tells the incredible true story of Charlie Chaplin in 3 seasons and 30 episodes. Season 1, The Kid, takes us from Chaplin's Dickensian childhood until he has arrived in Hollywood. To introduce Season 1, we'll briefly summarize a key scene.
In the first episode of the first season, 3 older boys are looming over 5-year-old Charlie Chaplin in the schoolyard. They're calling him Sir Francis Drake, the famous Elizabethan explorer, because Charlie's wearing baggy red tights, and no self-respecting boy would be caught dead wearing red tights in 1895. But instead of bursting into tears, Charlie declares that he is Sir Francis Drake. And then, by some magical alchemy, he seems to grow taller before their eyes. And all at once he's pacing back and forth, asking for brave volunteers to join him on his next voyage. He begins hoisting a sail, and his movements are so compelling that the boys can almost see the huge sail flapping in the wind. He orders one of them to take over and hands him the line, then thrusts an imaginary mop at another and barks at him to start swabbing the deck. Before long, he has all the boys hard at work as the ship sets sail. And then a storm hits.
In this first episode, Charlie discovers he has the uncanny ability to make people totally believe in what he's pretending. He will use this ability, along with his physical agility, to survive life on the mean streets of Victorian London. This is Charlie's first clue that his acting is a kind of superpower.
Season 2 is all about the tramp, whose behavior on screen is absolutely deplorable, but hilariously funny. The public falls in love with him at first sight, and within 2 years, he is the most familiar and beloved person on the planet. Money, sex, and celebrity mingle together in an intoxicating brew. Men want to be him, and women want to bet him. Charlie helps the Roaring Twenties roar. He convulses people with his films, and his comic antics at parties become legendary as well. So do the scandals, which alternate like clockwork with his great films. But the Depression brings the party to a crashing halt, and the coming of sound hits Hollywood hard. Charlie feels his tramp character has no place in modern times, so he decides to throw in the towel.
In this script, the FBI stage manages a lurid paternity suit against Charlie by an unhinged woman named Joan Barry. Yet Charlie can't help picturing its comic possibilities, even as he testifies at the trial.
Hold the child up, Chaplin. Higher. Hold her higher, I say, so the jurors can see the unmistakable family resemblance.
As Scott continues his harangue, we see him from Chaplin's point of view. Suddenly, the color bleeds out. Scott's voice fades away, and silent moving music begins.
The action speeds up noticeably. Scott roughly pulls the baby away from Chaplin and brandishes it towards the jury. Joan strides up to Scott and tries to take her child back. Scott yanks it back so violently that he accidentally tosses it to the head juror, a prune-faced woman who quickly passes it to the next juror. The baby is passed around the jury box like a hot potato, winding up back with the head juror, who stands and throws it like a football to Judge O'Connor. Horrified, O'Connor tosses it back to Scott. Joan tries to intercept it, and as the two struggle, the baby flies out of their hands in a high arc.
Whereupon we cut back to the witness stand, and suddenly it's the tramp up there. He instantly leaps into action and catches the child just as it's about to hit the floor. Baby Carol Ann smiles up at him beatifically. Suddenly, the entire courtroom erupts into chaos. The judge leaps over the bench and joins Scott and Joan chasing Charlie. The jurors join in, and in trying to elude them, Charlie falls backwards into the jury box. And we hear the sound of a baby crying. Color bleeds back into the scene as we realize that Chaplin has simply spaced out and imagined all this.
Mr. Chaplin! Mr. Chaplin, can you hear me?
Chaplin, himself again, shakes his head the way he does in so many films. After a moment of disorientation, he smiles ruefully.
Are you finding these proceedings amusing, Mr. Chaplin?
I find you vastly amusing, Mr. Scott. I haven't seen anything this funny since Cecil B. DeMille's last biblical potboiler. Would you by any chance be interested in appearing in a movie?
I am no actor, sir.
On that, at least, we are agreed. Funnyman is not an ordinary biographical drama, nor is it an expressive documentary. It is a dramatic story about an underdog boy who makes it big with the superpower of his imagination that was handed down to him. And there we go. So that's the concept video Dan and I had put together. The work we've done is really forming the actual series from beginning to end, and going away and Dan fleshing it out and actually writing a couple of episodes and a lot of dialogue peppered throughout the whole show. But it's not entirely written. It's left open in order to be finished, and it's the concept that we're trying to create and make connection with. Dan,
Anybody have any questions or comments?
Comment. Bravo.
Dominique, of course. Unmute yourself, Dominique. We can't hear you.
Sorry. I have only one comment. Bravo.
Oh,
What did you say? I didn't understand.
Bravo.
Said
Oh.
bravo.
Bravo in English.
I really understand. I just wanted to hear it again.
Bravo, bravo, bravo.
Well, you folks are in a position to appreciate that we're not interested in doing, in a filmic context, we're not interested in doing a documentary or replicating what Chaplin did do, because nobody's going to do better Charlie Chaplin scenes than Charlie Chaplin. But we're extrapolating because, of course, even when he wrote his autobiography in 1964, he's giving you pages of dialogue of things that happened 40 years earlier, and nobody can remember what they said one hour earlier. So he's recreating it in the way that any writer would do. And so we're taking the freedom to take what we find most compelling about Charlie Chaplin and extrapolating on that. As you all know, who are so familiar with it, he says nothing about, he tells us that he was bullied in school because he was wearing his mother's cut down red tights. He doesn't tell us that he came back at the bullies. In our vision, he does come back. And I feel that part of our vision is that Charlie, as a character, the tramp character, is the person he would have been as a child to protect himself from all the horrors that he endured of poverty and the drug addiction around him and so on. If he had the means to, he already had the embryonic skill, but if he had, my vision of the kid, which of course I didn't say today when we were doing it, is that what Charlie recreated is the person he would have wanted to have to be protecting him when he was a kid. And with all those resources that Chaplin, the great film artist and, you know, the fully trained artist, a lifetime of training on stage, followed by bursting through the new medium of film and finding that he could transform it because of the preparation he had, which includes the rich material he had to draw on in his Oliver Twist-like background. And so I've been taking great delight in imagining Charlie doing in real life what he does in his movies, which is to exhibit a tremendous grace under pressure and to come through it in ways, triumph in the particular ways, triumph of the underdog in the way that he gives us this vision in film that we all relate to so much. So that's what we're trying to go for.
yeah.
Dan.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, Joe.
I'm wondering if you are aware of the writings of a guy named John Bradshaw.
I'm not.
You may be way ahead of me, but if you're not aware of John Bradshaw, I think you want to look him up. He invented the term rageaholic. And he's not a film historian, he's a psychiatrist or psychologist. And his theory is that every one of us was at one point shamed in childhood. And that a good exercise for everyone, he says, is to go back and relive that shaming period and eliminate the shame from it. You see what I mean? What you're describing is exactly what John Bradshaw is saying we must all do.
And is your statement, Joe, leading to a confession that none of us are really going to want to hear? I mean, because I was hoping to get mine in first. Lord knows Jason has a lot to say.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll look him up. Thank you for that tip.
Yeah, that's great.
I think
well, it definitely relates to the kid, because I think that's what the kid is.
Yeah.
I thought that before you said it.
Yeah.
So I think that's something you might want to explore.
The deep humiliations that he is so eloquent about in his autobiography, and really through all the other reported accounts of his when he talks about his past. And one of the scenes that I just wrote on this, I really don't want to write 30 episodes before we have some interest. And by the way, it may be more than 30 episodes. But at the same time, my head keeps exploding from the sort of critical mass that we're now forming on this project. But one of the scenes I had great fun writing is Charlie's return to Hanwell, which is one of the schools, the orphan school, the poor school that he was that he and Sid were sent to when his mother was taken into the Lambeth Infirmary. And Charlie, in 1921, was supposed to go there, and he could not bear it. He couldn't do it. He avoided it. In 1931, he made it. And there's a news report, Dominique will verify this, of the fact, I mean, when you read the reports in the biographies, it says he came and he couldn't even deal with the kids, and he left quickly. And he promised to come back with all kinds of movie equipment and gifts, and he didn't come up. He stood them up, and that's the bad rap of what happened, or what he's reported. In fact, when he went there, he performed for the kids. They were assembled in a group, and he performed for them. And they say what he did, one of his sort of party mimes that he did. But I have him doing something very different in front of the kids. I have him performing a reenactment of his time at Hanwell, which is not comic, and is disturbing to the staff certainly. But then veering into something that he knows they're waiting for him to do, when he sees that some of them are nodding and others are kind of puzzled, so it's that kind of freedom that doing a fictional piece allows us. And so rewriting the past, as it were, which is what he did, obviously, in his filmic, the whole of his career is a filmic autobiography. As Andrew Sarah says, a filmic autobiography on the highest level of artistic expression. And what you're putting your finger on, Joe, is what it is that Jason and I have talked about this so much. There's something about his films right from the beginning that is so compelling that they still command an audience's attention. And for those of us who are more deeply drawn in, they become part of our lives. I met my friend Hooman introduced me to a person who's a rock star who said Charlie Chaplin made him a better person, seeing the Charlie Chaplin films. And ultimately, I think that's why we watch, or what we get out of any art is that we are ourselves informed by it. We're instructed by it. It's certainly Charlie. I know I have vivid memories of my first time seeing my first Charlie Chaplin film, and I know that I wanted to be him. I didn't want to be him. I wanted to be as cool as he was.
Yeah, for sure.
And Jason has a different read that connects much more to a more deep spiritual and mostly possibly money grubbing vision that he has.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about the money. Now, yeah. So Dan and I spoke for hours on the phone over the last 20 years or so, 3 maybe. And when I was able to get a word in edgewise, I would. Now he's the writer. He is most definitely the writer and the historian of the entire thing. I because of my background as an actor, getting in the head of Charlie Chaplin in a very different way than writing or coming from a historic point of view. It's to see what it feels like to be the guy, to see maybe what affects us, and probably the psychology of it. Maybe from all the history that I've been able to absorb, even Chaplin himself, and we have evidence of it, doesn't really care about his own history path. None of us really do, perhaps, but he just lived his life. And also, how does that work for a modern audience? We like to think of ourselves very sophisticated nowadays in the way we consume our movies on television and more recently and most definitely streaming. Streaming's an entirely different way of consuming a film nowadays, and this would be a 30-hour film at least, or more or less, and that's what we've talked about as well. Is it's got an accordion style, so we have a definitive life we're talking about, and that's Charlie Chaplin's life, but we could expand it into 60 episodes if we needed to, or 6 seasons. It depends on how much we detail the bits in between, and we fill in the historical fact and the things we don't know with fiction, and that comes straight out of Dan's mind there, and it's based off his imagination. Yes, so and that's extrapolating from what he knows about the world surrounding Charlie Chaplin and the historical documents that exist, and his own experiences, and what we'd like to see, and what our audience would like to see, and what we accept and what we don't accept, and what we accept in movies that are out right now. The biggest thing right now is superhero movies. Superhero movies, love them or hate them, are very important in the way we tell stories right now to the audiences that are paying for it. So it's almost like everybody has to be a superhero no matter what. And we found that somewhat formula in Charlie Chaplin. I'm sure we could all agree, that's why we're kind of gathering annually anyway, that he is a superhero of sorts. He has some power over us, and he has powers that he wields. And it's not just laughter, it's his magnetism. It's built right into his persona. And we went so far as to, well, where did he get that from? And you'd inherit those from somewhere. If it's not Mount Olympus, it's your mother, in this case, Hannah. The power of observation, storytelling, embodying, mimicking, and doing all that with charisma at a very early age and with confidence. And we think Chaplin is that superhero. I'm not going to put a cape on him, but you still have to tell it in a certain style of narrative. And Dan's very good at finding that. And I've noticed it in his Sir Francis Drake episode is perfect. He just rises above it. And in that episode, his brother has the same red pants because there was enough material, and he didn't fare so well in that because he doesn't have the same superpowers. So that's my job is to keep the vision and continue to see who the modern audience is, and see if we can bend a topic like Charlie Chaplin, some old silent film clown, which I'm saying that not from my point of view, but a lot of people today don't quite understand who Charlie Chaplin is and think he's just one of those black and white guys that who cares. And I think our job is to educate differently that way to the masses, people that sit on the couch and watch Netflix and only watch superhero movies. So I think that's it.
So I just thought of a cute gag, that was all. An in-joke about Superman had a civilian-clothed Charlie, when he creates the chant, go into a phone booth and come out immediately dressed as the chant.
Yeah.
Maybe doing a spin as he does it, you know.
Yeah. See those, and without joking about that, that is something that can happen because it may have happened. We're so used to seeing pop culture, and assuming Superman's pop culture, we're seeing that right now as if that's where it began. But it could quite possibly have begun in those days. And there are ways to do that. There was ways to write it. And yeah, without a joke, that could fit.
But you know, that idea of a superhero goes back to the Greek gods, and probably a lot goes back to the whole idea of God. And so long precedents. And by the way, we do have some news. It's very early. We can't reveal too much, but we're getting some nibbles of interest in presenting this to people. And I want to acknowledge too, before we wind up tonight, that Jason is my complete and invaluable collaborator in this, and that astonishingly polished video you just watched, although it's just a rough cut of the latest iteration, was completely created by Jason. He's a brilliant, as you can see, a brilliant videographer and graphic artist. The drawings that you saw that were like storyboard drawings, one of my college classmates is Hollywood's #1 movie poster artist, and his job now, all the movie posters are done with computer graphics now, but he started doing the original Batman movie, if you recall, had a very striking, gleaming, metallic bat signal. That's an oil painting that he did, my friend Bill Garland. And so now what he does is an ad agency for the movies will send him 30 very rough thumbnail type of storyboard drawings, and he will take them, change the composition, change them around, and turn them into, in a very short time, quite polished sketches, of which you saw 3 or 4 of them there. And those, in the movie industry, one of those will be selected for the main poster. Here's the print ad, and so on. And they'll then use the photographs that their little the production stills that their thumbnails are based on. And so Bill is essentially designing. I mean, he did both Wonder Woman posters and the Shrek, and he's generous enough to have done this contribution to our little video too. But I want to give Jason, I want to give you full credit for, helping us. Let's face it, if this thing ever happens, it's going to be because we're pretty successful marketing, selling the thing. And, the people who are joining us on this, all of you out there are the choir that we don't need to say anything about, because you've all had the same difficult conversation with people who say to you, what's with this obsession? Who cares about going to a silent movie showing, or thinking of what's why don't you do something? Why don't you get your head out of the sand? Whatever. I mean, my friends, when I got into that first Charlie Chaplin film in college, became worried about me after a few weeks, and because they liked the film, everybody liked the film, but I didn't seem to move out of it, and they thought there was something. They became quite concerned for my mental health. And for that matter, they still are. But
that does explain a lot, Dan. It really does explain a lot.
Yes, indeed. And
can I add something?
Yes, Dominique.
I totally agree with you, Dan and Jason, about Charlie as a superhero. For us, who are really Chaplin fans and Chaplin aficionados, but now on internet, it is not a question of why do you like black and white actors or silent actors. It is why do you like something who is presented as a pedophile man. Do you understand what I mean? A pedophile. Something old who like.
This is something. Thank you, Dominique.
Young women, and it is totally transformed. The truth is totally transformed by internet. So how can we fight against that image that is spread on the web now.
Yes, and we have been told early on. We were told because we've been seeking advice from everybody we can in the business, and we were basically told if Charlie Chaplin is seen as a predator, a Me Too kind of predator, that this thing won't get made. Somebody else actually just said to me, who's a quite well-known writer in Hollywood, who has a big project of his own based on a detective series he's written. He said he's having trouble with his detective series because films about straight white men are not being done now. But that's not entirely true. Robert Downey has a prequel to what's his name, Perry Mason, that's just been aired, and so on. I think the answer to your question is that we show the person in dimension, and we're dealing with that. There's a historical thing that you'll all appreciate about Charlie Chaplin, because he was, let's face it, he got into trouble a lot with women even before the era of Me Too, and before the era where getting married at the age of 15 or 16 was considered a scandal. It was considered the norm back in Charlie's childhood, but people don't have that historical perspective now. However, there is a peculiar thing that happened with him, and it didn't happen with, we know that he was a womanizer, but he was certainly no, the first time I met David Robinson, David told me that everybody thinks Charlie was a womanizer, but Sid made him look like a monk.
True.
But Charlie has an Achilles heel with respect to that, and it seemed that in his life, with every major artistic triumph, came an equal and opposite disaster that was completely self-created. He was the architect of his own, what's the expression? The architect of his own, not damnation, but
demise.
Architect of his own misfortune. And there was an equal and opposite scandal, like, after he makes the gold rush and he has that pretty bad 2 years with Lita, suddenly his career is threatened because there's a 50-page divorce complaint that is a legal document that reads like pornography, and within 2 days of being filed in court is on sale at street corners and back rooms all across the United States, because it reads like pornography about the most popular guy in the film industry, the most popular guy anywhere. And, the fact that he suffered from, in other words, I don't want to say it was anything intentional, because I don't think it was, but he punished himself quite thoroughly for every misstep he made, most every misstep. And he also made good on many of them. And admirably, we know he was no shrinking violet in terms of ego, but he was very modest about the people he helped. And part of our story is going to be the dimensionality of this guy. Let's face it, if you want to say anybody who's violating contemporary standards of propriety is got to be canceled, as they say now in America, I don't know if you're using that expression in France, Dominique, then we lose Leonardo da Vinci, we lose Michelangelo, we lose just about everybody in history, and we lose George Washington in the United States and Thomas Jefferson, and that's being considered by certain parts of the culture because they own slaves, or as we are now supposed to say, enslaved people. A semantic distinction that I find insulting to the people that it's trying to protect. But because there were lots of slaves all through history, including people in my family.
We did address that. We had long conversations about that right from the beginning, and that was a major concern. I mean, how do you create a television series about a guy that's, got a bad rep out there with some people, mostly people who are ignorant to the facts and also historical context. And we did find, actually Dan found an awful lot of things that do equal and level the playing field a little bit. And one in particular was with Paulette Goddard. I mean, there are scenarios where the two of them, Charlie had to be shown that he met his equal somewhere, right? I mean, Dan, do you want to talk about that? You came up with it, and it really made a big difference.
Well, I don't know how many Chaplin buffs are aware that of Paulette Goddard's side of the story, and she appears in 3 of our episodes in the last season, and one of them is called The Gander, because Paulette was as sexually active as Charlie, and she had a torrid affair with George Gershwin in the last months of Gershwin's life, and that was a love triangle that I'm really looking forward to writing about, because they were the two consummate party entertainers of the era. If you had George Gershwin at your party, he said he didn't have any fun unless he sat down at the piano, and he didn't get up till the party was over. If you had Charlie Chaplin at your party, he didn't have any fun unless he got up and suddenly everybody's standing around him as he describes his latest trip to fishing expedition to Catalina, and suddenly he's the man fishing, and then he's the fish struggling, and before you know it, everybody's in hysterics. And they both had that power to mesmerize, one through music, of course, and one through acting. I want to write the sparks that fly between them, and in fact, I have done, because I can't resist. Because here's the deal. When I was, I worked on the movie with Robert Downey, of course, and when you have a 2-hour movie, as we said in our conclusion to the video, this is a life that's too big. We could make a 2-hour movie of as your original impulse, the period of life covered in Charlie Chaplin's Red Letter days, where Fred Goodwin was writing a weekly diary about what's going on with Charlie and the gang. That was only 2 years. And there was so much happening. He was making the films. His life was he was getting death threats in the mail because he wasn't enlisting. He was getting, everybody wanted a piece of him. He was getting what is a now very familiar what happens to celebrities, but it hadn't happened to very many people on that scale. It had never happened to anybody. Mark Twain could have walked down any street and not been recognized in 1890. That wasn't happening with Charlie or Douglas Fairbanks or Mary Pickford. It was a new kind of fame. It was I didn't read one of the latest biographies by a guy named Peter Ackroyd. Wrote a little biography called Charlie Chaplin, A Brief Life, and I thought, well, it's going to be skimmed. But it was very thoughtful biography, and one of the things that he said was, talks about Charlie returning to England and how the crowds were out. I mean, like the armistice, they were there, and they weren't there to see him perform. He couldn't perform. There was too many of them. They were there to thank him. And this was a level of fame that nobody in history had ever experienced. And he was unprepared to deal with it, and he spent the rest of his life coping. What do you do to come back and answer your question, Dominique, about how we're dealing with it? Because I recently wrote a piece about this of where Henry Bergman, who we all know what his relationship with Charlie was. He was like his uncle, his affectionate uncle, and he's warning Charlie. We don't have any of this, but in our world, we can do that. He's warning Charlie, don't do this with Lita. Don't be an idiot. She's 15. For God's sake, stay away. And he says, and Charlie says to him, my Charlie, in my imagined words, says, Henry, do you know what it's like to walk into a restaurant and have every head in the room turn towards you and salivate?
The point, Dan, is not to judge Chaplin. The time was a time in the 10th and 20th centuries. Now, these images are read in the 2021 year with difference in appreciating the book. And who is going to explain to our children? My children are telling me, why is Chaplin is called a pedophile, or why is he a womanizer? He was not at the time. I know it. We know it. But how can we prevent internet to spread the image of Chaplin as a womanizer?
Well, he was a womanizer. You can't prevent it.
Yes, of
What
course
would
he
you do
was.
is-
But
Look,
at
so
the
was-
time, it
so
was not
Clint-
the same thing as it is always. It is today.
You know Clint Eastwood, our actor Clint Eastwood over here, and I saw him interviewed some years ago on 60 Minutes, one of our big interview shows. And the Mike Wallace said to him, "I understand that you have 10 children by 10 different women." And Clint Eastwood, it's like watching a scene from Dirty Harry. He goes, "Yeah." Like, it's commonplace now. It's not a big deal. They were terrified, and Richard Attenborough talked to me about it when he made his $40 million biopic, that Charlie had to be whitewashed and made saint-like in a way that he wasn't. He was saint-like in plenty of other ways, but he was not saint-like with respect to women. What he was doing was common practice. It's common practice still, as we know all too well from the continual exposures, which I think are absolutely proper for people to be exposed and disgraced, like the guy from Fox News and name your favorite predator. But Chaplin did it. The reason we're not going to have to worry about that in our series is that Chaplin does it to himself. He shoots himself in the foot every time he missteps, and we're not making any fiction about that. That's our reading of it. That's what happened.
Yeah, and one thing about it is, imagine what it was like to be Chaplin at the age he was, to become so powerful and so famous without much precedence to follow. You couldn't say, well, I'm not going to be like that actor who did this and was like that. There just wasn't enough of that available to be that meteoric in their success. And then, to have everybody salivate, and women did throw themselves at him. And he was a young guy, making no excuses for him, but it's almost like, well, what did you expect him to do? He was still almost hormonal at that age, wanting women and getting more than his share. And it became public. Again, not much of a precedence there, how to keep that to himself or better, and probably enjoying himself. So we do want to show that existed. I don't think whitewashing would serve the series well at all. We still have to show that happens, and that even a superhero can fall. And but we also need to show that the score does get evened a little bit. And as time,
don't forget, there's an issue of who is chasing whom.
Yeah,
he was pursued. I mean, and the saying "power corrupts," but there's not a lot of people, if suddenly they became literally the most attractive and desirable person in the world, who would be able to say, "No, I prefer to live a conventional American life with honor my marriage vows." And the temptations are, these are stories we keep telling each other because they're stories that each of us face in our own worlds, at key moments in our lives, and in many ways in our daily lives. What is the proper way to live? That is the question of our existence, and it's the question that's addressed by great literature and great art like Chaplin's films. That's the question he asks in The Kid. Who is a sinner? He starts the film right off with Edna, the woman whose sin was motherhood, and then the rest of the film questions what constitutes sin and what constitutes virtue. And he makes fun of Christian morality in a very subtle way in his film. In a very overt way, but it's so embedded with the plot. We don't think about it because we're having too much fun watching the fun and games of the film. But it's a very serious, and if you think about that, Chaplin kept coming back to that religious theme. His mother became a religious convert as she was struggling with mental illness, and he talks very movingly in his book about how she would bring him to tears and herself talking about Jesus' sacrifice. And he keeps coming back to religion in his films again and again and again. Morality. What is Monsieur Verdoux except an examination of morality? What ends justify what means after he's lived through two tremendous bloodbath wars? which were justified because the ends of freedom, whatever, and so on. You know, look at all the films, Sunnyside, The Pilgrim. Again and again, he comes back to religious morality, although I've never heard that he ever attended church as an adult, but I think he had his fill of conventional religion and conventional pieties. And his life is a challenge to those things. And our series will throw that back, I hope, in people's faces in a way that makes them not so ready to dismiss him because he's, by the cliched contemporary standards of the moment, falls into one of the easy categories. When I first came home and told my mother and my stepdad that I'd seen this amazing film, it was The Gold Rush, my stepdad, we were driving, and he turned around and he said to me, well, he's a fine hero for you to have. And he was not thinking about the sex stuff. That was not a big deal. That was not news. It was an admirable thing for everybody. Envied Lita and everybody envied Mildred. Oh, they got the chief, they snagged the chief most available bachelor in the world. And how great that Charlie's got his child bride. And, you know, they're going to grow up with the amazing, wonderful, funny Charlie Sheen. For him, Charlie was a communist. Charlie was not patriotic. And that was, you know, that was partially his own stupidity and doing as well. Nobody cared how Alfred Hitchcock voted. Nobody knows. You know, Stan Laurel, you know, didn't become a citizen either. But nobody ever brought that up and threw it in Charlie's face. He did things he was unwise about his public relations for a variety of reasons. So that was the double whammy in America that made him go from one of the most popular guys to one of the most unpopular guys by the time he was effectively booted out in 1952. It was a double whammy of he was a old lech, they would have said. They wouldn't have said predator in those times. He was an old lech, and he was a pinko commie. And nobody cares much about the pinko commie thing anymore because America itself was disgraced by, you know, the use of that device to bring certain people like Nixon up to political prominence. But the sexual thing is now front and center. And so Jason and I have had many conversations about it. So sorry for going on at heated length because we're really dealing with this square on in as direct a way as possible. That's redundant because we have to. And, you know, it doesn't come up when Charlie's a child, but one of the things that the long form allows us to do is to show us who his dad was, as well as his mom. And not just repeat the same stories he tells, but, you know, show that things were a little bit loose for them too. She had, you know, 2 illegitimate children as well as Charlie. And, you know, that cost her marriage. Or we don't know if it cost her marriage, you know, but in our vision, that it's not his fault that his parents are you know, unhappy and that he's, you know, being shuttled from dismal apartment to a dismal apartment and sometimes to a relative who then boots Hannah and him out. You know, these are things that'll be grounding who he becomes.
Yeah. And yeah, and that's the big thing is trying to sell to, what did you say, Dan? No, but we did have an awful lot of discussion about that specifically because we're both very sensitive to it. I mean, you have to be. So we've taken that as a strength and found that that's a great opportunity for us, our producer, and the studios to sit down and actually broach that subject and actually figure out how we can deliver that to the audience that wants to know how we're going to do it. And I think we found a good way of doing it. And it's not just that, but you're right, that the communist part of it is a very important one and actually mirrors that one. It's interesting.
Yeah. So that's how we've been working anyway. And stay tuned because we'll send out little updates through Rena about if we make more headway. We certainly have made a lot of headway in terms of the, as you can tell, in terms of our long-term mapping out of the project. And so we hope to bring you all good news. And I'm really glad you're all hearing us and nobody's saying, well, wait a second, You can't make up, because those of people who are sticklers because we're not simply replicating the stories he tells us, are not going to like this, because this is really, doing what we need to do, because we're both artists who are concerned about what artists are, which is keeping the public's attention and entertaining them. Every episode has to be a completely self-contained thing that has a lot of inherent drama in it and makes you want to go on to the next episode and see what happens. And it's not just to flog, you ought to like Chaplin because we like him. Nobody cares about that. And I found out in many past projects, as I would tell people I'm in Hollywood making a movie with blah, 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 that they didn't know anything about Charlie Chaplin. They didn't know he made a film about Hitler. Things that are commonplace to us who are part of the Chaplin world for so long, who are bound together because of our mutual sense of the importance of this artist in our lives. There's a big world out there that we all know about too that just doesn't give a shit. And so our job is to make them give a shit, just because everything that we put before them is fun to watch and has some really good, fun comedy. Because of course, what we're bringing to the table as performers, is I'm just wiping a thing off your nose, Jason. Is our sense of who Charlie is from the inside, and our imagining of that, and so to the one question we've already had from a producer, which is, oh, you can't have a thing about his childhood. The audience is going to have to see him as the tramp right away. You have to have that image. My response is, they are seeing him that way. They're seeing him that way when he responds to the bullies in the schoolyard, and he does the kind of thing to get out of the jam that his adult self would do in a comparable jam. We're seeing that in embryo, and we're going to watch the blossoming of his talent through his childhood. And if we do our job right, Charlie is going to be there, whether he puts, because let's face it, you put like looking at Charles Jr. On the park bench doing his little impersonation. If he's not doing something interesting for us, then after a minute we're going, okay, next act, Ed. Thank you.
That is the thing, is to get the people to buy into something that we love, and we can't just tell them you need to love it too. We do have to present it in the way that they will consume it properly, and ultimately that's what a studio will pay for as well. We can't just do something biographical at all. It has to have that entertainment value, and we found that kind of formula would work well if we make sure that it's funny. That's the thing about it, is it can't just be all serious, because Chaplin wasn't serious. He wasn't, no, he was serious. As we all know, he was serious, but he was also a very funny man. And we have to actually show the humor, not some actor just showing how Chaplin was funny. We need to laugh at this series. And when I came up with, I got to talk to Dan about this. We need to make a series. I have this vision in my head. It was coming off of me watching Netflix and watching The Crown. From Canada here, I feel part of the monarchy and everything, but I've never really been deep into it. I haven't sat and consumed it the way I should have, and learned about our Queen the way I think now I should have. That I got an education, more than my school gave me, about Queen Elizabeth and her family and my monarchy by watching The Crown. And I think that's wonderful. Wonderful that we have that available, and we have a modern audience that does take their education from watching Netflix nowadays. It may sound sad, but I think we can educate people through that medium about our Charlie Chaplin as well. And we are all connected to him, and there is a part of him in all of us if we just look at it. And I really, God save the Queen, for sure. It was a fantastic series. And I also want to make sure that Chaplin is not The Crown. That's not the idea at all. There has to be another entertainment factor that reminds us that Chaplin is entertaining, and the series itself has to be entertaining. We see reboots of everything. Back to superhero idea again. Dan and I talk a lot about the superheroes and how when X-Men came out, it came out with everybody wasn't wearing that color of outfit from the comic books. They were wearing leather outfits, and they might even had little nipples built in. I don't know, but they weren't the same as the comic books. It was so much more graphic, more real and substantial, and it gave everybody something to talk about around a water cooler. Well, did you see? I've known comic books all my life. Now their outfits are these, and we see them in real life. Well, we know Charlie Chaplin only from the Gospel, and that is all of his films. But we don't. And then we got that other new version that we've been building in our own head, and in a lot of cases, it's just a guy with big feet and a cane and a bow tie, and I don't know what else, but it's kind of skewed. It's not accurate enough, especially when you talk to historians or any of us. It's just not accurate enough, and I want to show the accuracy straight up, how dynamic that superhero Charlie Chaplin was and is.
If it was just those elements, it might as well be Billy West.
Yeah. May as well be, right? But even then, he doesn't have the magnetism or the magic that Chaplin had, and anybody can say that. So
it's the man inside it, yeah.
What's that?
The difference is it's the man inside the ensemble. It's not just the costume. It's
That's right.
the man within.
And when we follow a character like that from the beginning, from their making, before they're even born, which our series actually covers some ground before the birth of Chaplin, we get committed to those characters and we follow them in their journey. And it can't be Billy West. It has to be Charlie Chaplin. We'll see why he's Charlie Chaplin. We'll see why he was the chosen one. We'll see everything about it. It's very exciting to talk about, and I can't wait for the day when we stand up and show the premiere. Whenever that's going to be, I don't know.
Well, all right. Well, I just want to throw in, does anybody have any last minute things they'd like to mention before we bring our party to a close?
I just had one comment about the video. I found it a little strange that I like the video. It's quite good, bravo. But I think you want to rethink the idea of selling Chaplin in the 20s while showing posters of films he made in the teens.
Spoken like a true geek, though.
Well, I'll tell you some truth right now. I just finished that part an hour ago. Well, no, I guess 2 hours ago now. But I'm struggling with that's in season 2, the coverage of season 2, and Dan and I have been trying to figure out you notice in season 1 we actually go through an episode and some dialogue, and we have the script flying into the screen, up into the screen, and then some imagery from Bill, and then season 2 is almost the one I'm taking for granted, because I know it. So we all know that's the Chaplin is season 2. That's like a 20-year segment of his life, the middle 20 years, basically, where he is the tramp and he became everything. And then the last 20 years is season 3, where we're talking about court case and so on, and eventually leads into Limelight is the near ending of the series. But I am totally struggling to find images to put in there. I'm really trying to avoid having any imagery that exists. This is supposed to be brand new material and using any posters, and it was a time crunch to throw that in there. And I thought, what pictures am I gonna? I just grabbed them and posted them as they spun in. I went, oh shit, oh, okay, that'll be what it is for today. But that's not that's definitely not it.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm glad you picked
I
up
have
on
to
that.
say,
It was the teens. It was the teens when he did a lot of that stuff. So the graphics are appropriate to that time in his life.
Yeah, it needs to be.
But your text keeps stressing the 20s.
Yeah.
And he made The Gold Rush. He made The Pilgrim. Those are great films.
Yeah.
They're the great films, but the truth is that SNA did the best posters. And
they did.
They're just great. And the one of Charlot from France is beautiful and fabulous, and it shows him striding the world. I thought I'd sent you. I'll send you the poster images from the 20s films, Jason. I didn't.
Oh yeah, and they're there. It's a matter of picking through them to go with the actual narration that we have in there. I was struggling, and I need more time to put into that for sure. And that's why I said Dan hasn't even seen this version, because there was a big void in there. We had something written in completely different, and we went right into talking about Netflix, and because we actually pitched this to a Netflix pitch day, and so I custom tailored it to maybe what I thought the people in Netflix wanted to hear. So I actually used their name, I used their graphics, I used even their menu that they use when you're surfing on your computer to pull up a video, and I created an icon that if you clicked on it, and so we're going away from that because we need to be on all platforms. It could very well be Amazon Prime, it could be or Amazon, and it could be anybody, National Geographic for that matter. But Netflix is probably what we'd really like to see, just because of its reach. It's huge, it's a monster, and we think that Chaplin deserves a big audience like that. So we're taking it back from tailoring it to directly to Netflix, because I know they're smart enough to figure it out for themselves, and I'm not going to be teaching them anything, but I do need to demonstrate what we might have for content for the second season. And I just don't want to regurgitate everything that we could look up for ourselves in Charlie Chaplin posters and so on. We don't have a full episode written with imagery in season 2. We have bits and pieces that Dan's created, but as he said earlier, we don't want Dan to, I'm not doing any writing because I'm not a writer. Dan does it all, right down to the dialogue. And so we just don't have that part because it's almost too obvious what happens during that year. It's too good. Like, there's so much information in season 2. People are really going to love that season. And season 3 is so great because we get to see him at the top of his hill, at the top of the mountain of everything, looking back down on it all, and where things collapse and the dangers of sliding back down that hill and so on. But yeah, that's why.
That's good. That that is what we need to work on. I did send you some. You were last minute here, but I did send you some of the newspaper headlines. Probably Dominique has about 40 files of newspaper headlines dealing with Mildred and Lita Gray, and some of those would be good to put in. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Do you have time?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Do you have time? Can I call you tomorrow morning?
No, not tomorrow morning. I'm not around tomorrow morning. I'm heading out, but I have to be back for 1 o'clock anyway for Whiz Bang.
Oh, that's
right.
True. We'll talk during the Whiz Bang. We'll turn the Whiz Bang into our
we'll mute everybody.
Thank you, Rena.
All right, well,
Rena, thank you for getting Jason and I putting us together at your fabulous Chaplin Days thing over the years. That Jason and I both attended a number of them, and if you hadn't done that, we wouldn't be doing this. And this has been whatever happens from here on, as you can all tell, I'm sure, listening to us, this has been a joyful thing to work on. We've both been just loving it, and we keep on just really pumping each other up because we get excited because we're grappling with this material that we've grappled with in other ways in our lives, and the way Chaplin has woven into our lives, and I think I'm speaking for everybody now who's present, in a way that pays off in unexpected and often delightful and productive ways. So thank you, Rena. This is all your fault.
Yes, thank you, Rena.
I'll take the blame. So today was a chance for us all to see each other and have like a little conference and such. Tomorrow's program, the Whiz Bang, way too long name, that's really more just a sharing our lookalike contest winners. I'm going to talk just a little bit about the renovations that we're working on with our museum and the need for funding. We have a major announcement as far as an acquisition that we have that we want to share. We're very excited about that. So there's going to be a lot, and that's tomorrow morning Pacific time, 10 a.m., which means 1 o'clock Eastern time, and you can all calculate your watches on what that means in any other part of the world. And I know it's very late now in over in England and in France and such. So why don't we bring this party to a close? And thank you all for attending. And we will see you tomorrow or in a few hours for some of you. All right.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Rena.
Thanks. Good
everybody.
night, all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Au
Bye.
revoir.
Bye.
Bye bye.